Ladies and gentlemen, my sisters, I stand here humbly as a child of the African soil, as a child of the struggle. I know what it is to fight oppression. I know how to have parents that are locked up in jail and to grow without parents. And each time you pass a fountain, to throw money into a fountain and wish your parent would be released from jail. So as I stand here today, I want to say I empathize with women in Iran, those who are outside of Iran, those who are inside Iran and fighting for freedom. But I want to assure you that today, as I stand here, I am a little bit disappointed that now, in this age, in this century, we're still talking about women's emancipation, women's liberation, at a time when we should be celebrating our own freedom, our own equality. There's not a single place in the world, even in the democratic countries, even in my countries, where we can say we have achieved 100% equality and freedom. We have made some progress, but as long as those who are poor are still the majority of women, we have not made any progress. Women across the world still face inequities across class, across culture, across ethnic lines in various intensity. I think when I've read about what's happening in Iran and the Middle East, I am reminded of the apartheid days in South Africa. Because if you glean the constitution of Iran today and see all of the laws that have been passed, they remind me of the apartheid laws, which were racist and sexist in nature, but that are similar. In Iran, the constitution considers women to be inferior to men. The constitution mandates that the legal code adhere to Sharia law, the Islamic moral code based on the Quran. Sharia has an Old Testament flavor, providing, for example, for public lessons, for certain offenses, and death by stoning for women who commit adultery. But as a Persian country, it is very much strong in character in terms of its patriarchy. And women in a patriarchal society are always expected to be subservient to men. While women in Iran, majority of them are in university, we know that they are now being prevented from access to about 77 courses at university. Yet, for all their success and their numbers in university, they are still severely marginalized in all spheres of society. They are still subjected to severe discrimination. A number of women who have demonstrated peacefully against the lack of human rights and the repeal of unjust laws have been harassed, tortured, imprisoned, and at times been killed. Women in general are not free. Their lives are decided by their brothers, by their husbands, by their fathers. Women have no right to travel or work without permission of their husband. As I say, the situation is akin to apartheid South Africa. The apartheid racial laws touched every aspect of social life in South Africa, including marriages, prohibiting marriages between whites and black. And secondly, there were additional liabilities that were put on women in terms of law and custom compared to African men. African women were and still are to some extent subjected to a triple exploitation in South Africa, which is race, sex, and gender. Employment is one concrete way in which women can assert and empower themselves in South Africa. However, women in the past, and to some extent now, end up in the lowest skilled jobs that are lowest paid, that mirror actually what is expected of them in terms of working in the home. So they are either domestic servants or working as farm laborer. Apartheid literally means separation of people according to race, to gender, and class. Over the last 100 years, the South African government enacted legislation that created a totally divisive society, one in which emphasis was on the differences between people. Life roles were created at birth by skin color and sex. Thus, education, achievement, status, and jobs were predetermined at birth. This applied most forcibly to black women who were cast in a role of subservience or lacking any expectations or opportunities. In actual fact, during the apartheid years, the education system that was designed was never designed for black people to be professionals, especially women. It was designed so that black people can understand the instructions of their masters, but will always remain subservient in society. We see this today in Iran, where though there is no racial discrimination in Iran per se, but we see a severe form of gender discrimination with regard to the kind of legislation the state has introduced, the facilities it provides, and the restriction it imposes, especially on women. For example, allowing women to gain university education, but also preventing them from a number of courses that will make them intelligent, participating individuals in society. In South Africa, we had a very strong patriarchal culture and a parliamentary system of laws that used discrimination against women. This racial and gender bias was through a blend of parliamentary supremacy, common law, and customary law. It is evident to me that even in Iran today, you have what is called parliamentary supremacy in terms of Sharia law that has laws that are against women in that society. Basic to the past constitutional structure of South Africa was a parliamentary supremacy. Parliament could make any laws on any subject it pleases, and there was not a single court of law in South Africa that could challenge those laws. Even under that exception, where there was no challenge to the parliamentary laws, still women were severely persecuted. But we as black people never gave up hope of fighting until the end. Under customary law in South Africa, women were perpetual minors under the guardianship of their father before marriage of their husbands upon marriage and of their male patrilineal relative on the dissolution of the marriage or on the death of their husband. A woman could not marry without the consent of a guardian and had no contractual capacity. The same is that in Iran. If you look at the civil codes of Iran, Article 1105 to Article 1170, it indicates that women basically have no voice in Iran. They have no rights in Iran. For instance, they are not allowed to marry non-Muslims. Within the household, the husband is entrusted with the task of heading the family. A wife must live in a home which her husband chooses unless she is given the right to choose the location of her residence. In actual fact, all of these civil codes, you know them. You are Iranians. You live there. Are severely against women. They are no different from the apartheid laws that existed pre-independence of South Africa in South Africa. As of to date, a number of significant apartheid legislation has been repealed since independence, since the ANC government took power. However, the ANC government realized long ago that the experience of other societies, and ours in particular, had shown that the emancipation of women could not be a product of a struggle for national liberation, socialism or democracy, or any agricultural society. Women's emancipation had to be addressed in its own right within the mass democratic movement and in society as a whole. African women in South Africa, just like women in Iran, have always been at the forefront of liberation struggle. Today, I can be proud to stand here and say in our parliament, we have over 55% of women represented. I can be proud to say today, in South Africa, we've had a Minister of Defense, past and now, who are women. We know that struggle is not easy. That struggling for freedom is not an easy road. There is no doubt that women in South Africa have achieved a lot. But I can tell you, even today, as I'm standing here, we women in South Africa are still struggling against violence of women. Women are raped every day in South Africa. But the people who are at the forefront of that struggle too are the women in South Africa who struggle against that. We are convinced also that something more than legal parliamentary state reforms are necessary to emancipate women from patriarchal authority. Unless not just educated, not just urban women, but also most of the rural women in our country are liberated, we know that we can talk about liberation until cows come home to roost. We cannot talk about the fact that women are truly liberated in South Africa. African women, similar to Iranian women, as I said, have been at the forefront of struggle. But I want to say we have a lot of energy. We have a lot of initiative as women. We need to solidify that energy and initiative to promote change amongst us. Through all the passion and the promise, that we have struggled, that we have talked about women's emancipation, for all its excitement and rewards of collectivized strength and achievement, South African women realize that it is a long journey to achieve total freedom. But having said that, I do not believe that we should surrender, that we should be silenced. We should be brave enough, courageous enough, as Mr. Rajini has done, to stand up for the truth that we know. I would like to take this opportunity to remind all of us present here today that my father, who I call Tata, Mr. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela, passed away in December of 2013. But today, he lives so that liberty, freedom, justice might not perish anywhere in the world. Those who can hear me present here today, please listen to him. That cold morning in 1994 when he said, "The time to build is upon us. We have at last achieved our political emancipation. We pledge ourselves to liberate all people from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender, and other discrimination. We succeeded to take the last steps to freedom in conditions of relative peace. We commit ourselves to a construction of complete, just, and lasting peace. We triumphed in an effort to implant hope in the breasts of millions of our people. We enter into a covenant that we shall build the society in which all South African people, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without fear or in their hearts, assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world." And he continued, "We dedicate this day to all heroes and heroines in this country and the rest of this world who sacrificed in many ways and surrendered their lives so that we could be free. Their dreams have become a reality. Freedom is their reward. We are both humbled and elevated by the honor and the privilege that you, the people of South Africa, have bestowed on us to lead our country out of the valley of darkness. We understand that there is no easy way to freedom. We know all well that it is not one person acting alone to achieve success. You have to work with other people to achieve success. I know that we have to hold each other's hands as women across the world, across rivers, across borders, across mountains, to support each other in our struggle for emancipation. So today, sisters, I want to say, do not despair. For today, there is momentary darkness. But when we think about the vision that my father, Nelson Mandela, had of a brighter future, we should know that although he sleeps today, he lighted a candle for all of us to take forward and never look back, to fight for freedom, even if we are jailed, even if we are killed, even if we are degraded, freedom is ours today if we don't lose the spirit. It is the spirit of standing up to injustice. It is the spirit of fighting discrimination wherever it is. We cannot look at ourselves in the mirror and say we'll be concerned about that injustice, but not this injustice. Injustice is injustice. Discrimination is discrimination, whoever commits it. I would like to end up with the words of Susan Fuladi, who wrote a book about backlash. She says, women's hour on stage is long overdue because whatever obstacles are mounted against the future march towards equality, whatever myths are invented, penalties levied, opportunities rescinded, or degradations imposed, no one, and I mean no one, can ever take from us the justice of our cause as women. So when we live here, we live with our heads high to say we are not going to the past, we are going to a future that we imagine, a future that is bright. Thank you very much.